Hi everyone, my name is Miguel Magalhães and welcome to another episode of DeNites TV, the videocast about all things Web3 in Portugal and around the world. Today we're going to have an episode that's a bit different. Instead of having a discussion about two people, we're still going to have a discussion, or rather a conversation about two people, and I have the opportunity to talk with Paulo Fonseca, who was recently appointed as one of the new members of the leadership team of DeNites. And I thought that this could be a good opportunity to present him, talk a little bit about his background and what has he done in an industry, and kind of talk about not only that, but DAOs, which is one of the areas in Web3 that he has kind of specialized, and also as a member of the new leadership team of DeNites, what can we expect from the community in the next coming months. Paulo, thank you very much for joining me today.
Thank you, man. Thank you for the introduction. It's a pleasure to be here.
Be honest with me, have you checked any of the latest episodes, or is this the first time that you're hearing me?
No, it's not the first time. I checked a little bit of the first one only. I just now realized that there's 4 more or something.
Yeah,
I didn't check, but well, that's what it is.
That's why I'm calling the new leadership, because I want to ensure that everyone in the community is listening to this. So if I can start with one of the leadership members, maybe everyone will follow. So the idea, as I said, Paulo, as I did a little bit of research, of course, and your background, as most people in Web3, it didn't start in Web3. So it started in design, and I wanted for you to tell me a little bit of your pitch and your story before you got in contact with Web3.
Well, yeah. So I'm a designer. I've always wanted to build things and to do stuff that creates a good impact in the world. And I've actually studied to be an industrial designer, the ones that create physical products that pollute the world and then go onto a landfill and destroy nature. And I realized that I didn't want to put more garbage into the world. And I realized that software was much easier to iterate on and to change and to experiment on. And so I switched to be a web designer at the time. And yeah, I've been doing UX design for like 12 years or something. Too much, maybe, probably. I've been, running design companies, teaching design and UX and so on, and been enjoying that as well. In 2016, I think, I had heard about Bitcoin before and so on, but in 2016, I was like, oh, there's this thing called the DAO.
But have you ever invested in Bitcoin or any of the currencies before you decided to kind of join the movement?
Well, I only joined the movement like full-time for real, like 1 year ago or something.
Okay.
More than 1 year ago, when I decided like, okay, I'm tired of traditional corporate work, and I'm gonna go full-time into crypto and Web3. And it was maybe like 15 months ago or something. And but I've been into the space kind of since 2016 because of DAO, the initial first DAO, let's say. And there was a big debacle, and then it was hacked, and it was a lot of fun. But I got the bug there, and started investing then, and learn more about the space, learn more about technology.
What did you really like about it? What about the concept of a decentralized autonomous organization? What was compared with what you have that really made you passionate about learning more about this specific technology?
Yeah, so, I mean, a bunch of stuff. At the time, I was running a design agency, like a normal design agency. And I had to hire people and pay salaries and do all the admin work and blah, blah, blah. And I was always trying to find ways to automate all the stupid, boring little processes that the company has. And one of the promises of the DAO at the time was to code is law, everything is automated, everything executes automatically. There's no possibility for corruption and collusion, like what's decided through a vote is what gets executed. It was a really pure version and idea of what the DAO could be. It was like the first implementation. And maybe it was also too idealistic because they didn't realize that they could get so much money into that contract. Like at the time, 15% of all Ethereum was into the DAO, which is a lot. It's like risky. And then that was ACT, and that's what created Ethereum Classic and Ethereum what it is now, right? The split between those two. And so, but the idea, the purest idea of what a decentralized organization could be in the way that they set up, I was like, yeah, of course. I mean, we are running corporations like if it was 19th century. This makes no sense. It's super bureaucratic. It's super boring. We have technology to be much better at running organizations and making decisions and making the right decisions. And so that was the promise of the DAO in the.
And what is for you the best definition of a DAO in simple terms compared to what we knew in the business world or in the way that organizations are structured? What is for you the best definition?
Yeah, I mean, I think the simplest way to tell about it is something that I said before, which is DAOs are to corporations, organizations, as democracy was to monarchy. I don't think people realize enough that in a corporation there is a king, there is an emperor that decides on fate of people with a thumbs up and a thumbs down. That exists. That's real, right? If a corporation decides to fire people, it will fire people. It will screw people's life with no mercy, as we've seen recently, by the way, like Google did to 12,000 people in the middle of the night or something, right? So it is kind of a non-democratic, one ruler for all kind of system that we have in corporations nowadays. And I mean, I've been running my own company for a while, and I don't like to be in that position. You know, I don't like to be in the position of the emperor that as that kind of control and power, because I know I'm not perfect and I can be corrupted and I don't always make the smartest decisions and so on and so forth. And when I realized, I was like, okay, there must be a better system to design an organization and to govern an organization that doesn't rely on the, you know, merits of one single person, the CEO, the owner, or whatever it is, right?
But do you believe that, the definition was much more clear, but do you believe that, and I know that in the Web3 space, there's a lot of companies that they are governed by a DAO, or at least they created a DAO to manage some of the dimensions of their business. But in the end, even with you, and we will go there in a couple of moments, but even with you believing in the way that a DAO structures, do you believe that it can be applied to all the different areas of a company? For example, don't you believe that at some point there's a need to be someone making some decisions instead of depending on a community to do it? Or you believe that the power of a community is also always enough for a company to move into a direction independently of what it is? No matter like a product that they should develop or a market that they should venture. Do you believe that a community-led vote, it's always better than having one person taking the shots?
Yeah, I don't. It depends on the decision. So we have to think from the point of view of, I mean, it's not that all corporations are wrong and don't deserve to exist. No, not at all. Like, we have the world that we have today because corporations were able to produce so much value that, you know, our grandparents could not even imagine, right? So that's there and that's done. But I think we're all feeling that era is coming kind of to an end, maybe, right? And so there must be something else for the future of humanity, let's say. And if that's the case, that something else will probably not look like a corporation. It will probably look like something else. My guess is that it will probably look more as a decentralized organization. But the difference is, there are a lot of things that should remain centralized, that should remain a company, a startup, that should remain a corporation, because they're not really the kind of problems that would benefit from a decision-making process that is decentralized. You know, a decentralized decision-making process only makes sense for certain types of decisions. Because if you're trying to ask a group of people, hey, what's the best setting for this particular bonding curve on this particular DeFi protocol? Like, forget it. The right decision is not going to come from there. The right decision is going to come from a group of experts that run simulations, do the analyses, are trained to do that, and they'll come up with the right number to do that, and that's it, right? But not all decisions are like that. Not all decisions benefit from an expertise point of view, right? Some decisions, specifically things like public policy or infrastructure investment or whatever, those kinds of more social decisions, sometimes they're better made by a community and by the intelligence of the community, of the collective, than by a single person that can be corruptible, that has other interests in mind, that has, you know, conflicts of interest in mind, and so on. So can be bribed, can be lobbied, can be blah, blah, blah. And so we can see that in those types of settings, a decision that is made by a collective is a better decision usually. So I don't think DAOs should be applied to everything. I think DAOs are the upgrade of corporations. Corporations will still be able to do what they do today, but we have a lot of problems in the world that up until now corporations were not able to solve. You know, like big coordination problems, like climate change, AI regulation, you know, existential threats of nuclear weapons, blah, blah, blah. Big problems in the world that no corporation is going to be able to solve, no government by itself is going to be able to solve. And that maybe, and that's the hypothesis, a decentralized organization will be able to solve, or will be better suited to solve, basically. That's kind of the pitch.
Yeah, but so far, from what I've seen, you have kind of three types of DAOs, right? You have like the token-based DAOs, where you have like some the issuance of tokens, and the amount of tokens that you hold kind of give you different power over voting power over their decisions. You have like share-based communities, right? There's not a need to be a token in order for you to be part of the DAO, and you still have like, they are called like reputation-based DAOs, which they function depending on the work or the contribution that you make to a certain community in the way they develop. Do you believe that right now there's a certain type that most Web3 startups that are using DAOs to govern their day-to-day, they are betting on more because it has proven to work in a better way? Or is it we are still in a time where we are trying to figure out exactly the design of the DAOs that kind of can produce actual results in the day-to-day of a Web3 business?
Yeah, that's what I spend most time thinking about, I guess, because we're still in the phase that we're designing DAOs, right? We have very few examples of successful DAOs as of now. We have very few examples of truly decentralized DAOs, and then we have, I'm pretty sure, 0 examples of autonomous DAOs. So, you know, the DAO, like the organization, yeah, okay, you can call yourself an organization, that's okay. Decentralized, meh. Autonomous, not at all. So we're still building it and trying to experiment with it. And that's the interesting part about this field, is that there's so many experiments, so many crazy experiments that you would never think of, that it would be impossible to do in the corporation, right? And so you can try them out here and see if it works or not. And up to the point that it could govern billions of dollars, right? There's some, nowadays, for sure, in the DeFi world, there are DAOs that govern DeFi protocols, and they have usually almost always token-weighted voting, which means the more tokens you have, the more voting power you have. And I mean, just recently, just like last week, and maybe this is a bit of a recap, there was a big drama because Uniswap was proposing, there was a proposal on Uniswap, and A16Z, the big investors, they were against it. And turns out they have a lot of tokens to vote no. So you see it, you look at the proposal, it's like a big no from A16Z and everybody else saying yes. And so you realize it's not really decentralized because these guys can control everything.
But so, my point is really that, and from like, I've never been part of a DAO, but for me and from the examples that I saw, it's really hard for a token-based DAO to be fully decentralized, because once your voting power is kind of dependent on the amount of tokens that you hold, that's not much different than having a
Shares in the
company board or shares in the company, and
It's the same.
depending on the amount of shares that you hold, you have voting power over even who is the CEO of the company or who leaves or what you want to do.
It's exactly the same. You do have more transparency because you see what everybody votes and you see how much everybody has, and you can even delegate your voting powers. So if you have shares but you don't bother to read the proposals and vote, you can delegate to somebody else that would. It's better in those terms, but it's very equivalent. So token weighted voting is kind of that kind of system, and it is being used to govern billions of dollars in DeFi protocols, and it's kind of working, sort of. I don't think it's the future of most DAOs. There is then a few upgrades, which is you can do one person, one vote kind of governance systems, where each human being deserves in its own right to have his voice heard, and they vote, and everybody is the same. It's very equal. There's some challenges with that in Web3 because you cannot really prove that one wallet is one human, because one human can have multiple wallets. So that's a proof of humanity kind of problem. So DAOs that implement that, they really have to do QIC, basically you have to prove that you're a real person and you have that wallet and you only have participating with that wallet and all that. So that's kind of messy. That's how we do it at RnDAO, the DAO that I'm part of. They helped create because we kind of know each other and we know, okay, these people voted, these people didn't vote, so we know.
But what is kind of the work? That's one of the questions that I wanted to ask you, is that what was kind of the idea when you decided, I believe it was RnDAO your first venture into Web3 and
when I was full-time,
full-time. What was your idea when you decided to create it, and what kind of value were you trying to bring to Web3 that you weren't seeing anywhere else?
Yeah, so we were not, by the way, RnDAO was not created just by me, it was created by me and a few other people. So it was 90% by me. But the thing at the time was exactly what I was talking about, which is this is an area of experimentation that we can try new governance models, right? And so RnDAO stands for Research and Development DAO, and so our aim is to do research about DAOs and understand better what are the problems and challenges within DAOs, and why DAOs are failing or not, and what are the best practices in DAOs. Basically, that's kind of a meta thing around DAOs. That's what we do there. And we publish research, and we do interviews. We do events with experts and a bunch of stuff. And we also now incubate some projects that we have that are building tools to help DAOs be more efficient in whatever areas. And so we also have those kind of tools incubated within RnDAO. But RnDAO was the first time that I tried myself to create a DAO with a few other people. And the challenge there is basically, okay, we want to create this in the most democratic, collaborative way possible. I mean, hopefully, right? Yeah. There's no dictator here. There's no emperor here that could do thumbs up, thumbs down. And so let's try to do this and try to come up with a solution. And it's really tough to have people that think differently in the same space trying to create something together, because you always feel that, okay, so who is leading here? Where's the leadership? Who decides? Where's the final word? You always do that with this industrial revolution mindset of there should be a decider, there should be a leader that's clear, and we all follow the lead, blah, blah, right? So there's a big issue about leadership in DAOs because it's not really clear how it should work. And being through the experience of trying to actually create a DAO and design a DAO and all that kind of gave me the humility to understand, yeah, this is really not easy to do at all. People are weird, people have their quirks, people have their are triggered by some things, are have their own biases, have their own experiences. Everybody has that, right? Me for sure. And so it's really tough to come up with a system where people can get along and accomplish something together and not get pissed off with each other about something, right? Yeah, which is what is usually happens on the internet. And so on trying to do that with RnDAO gave me that humility to realize, okay, these are really tough stuff, and it's not really easy to come up with a system that we can follow. We've looked at a bunch of Web2 traditional corporation, more decentralized governance models like holacracy and sociocracy and Teal and so on. And I mean, we even did events with the founders of those methodologies, explaining how it could be applied to DAOs and so on. The big difference with DAOs is that the person that's part of a DAO actually owns the DAO, right? It's actually not just a worker or a collaborator, it's actually an owner of the thing.
Yeah.
And you as a human being, when you own something, you treat it differently, right? If you own something and you work for that something, right? If you own a company and you work for the company, you treat it differently as if you just work for the company, right? If you're just getting a salary for the company, right? So just imagine everybody having that sense of ownership about the thing, and then trying to figure out how to govern the things together without pissing each other off, right?
It's kind of, really tough. It would be like an improved version of like having stock options when you enter a company, right? But you don't necessarily have like voting power, right? When you receive stock options, you still have some incentive in order to not necessarily get along, but you are more interested in the performance of a company, not necessarily in getting along in terms of viewing and direction with the people that you work with, or not necessarily that you work with, but even within the people that use your platform or your software or whatever. So it's kind of a different dimension, because what you're telling me, it can either be applied to the people that surround you, and you kind of have to find a way to work together in any dimension of a company. But then you also have the dimension of the people that you work for or that you build a product for can also be part of the thing that
can also own the thing,
on, right? And that's not necessarily a dimension that exists today in Web2 companies, right?
Not at all. It's as if someone that drinks Coca-Cola can own a bit of Coca-Cola just because
they drink that doesn't happen. But do you believe that, for example, if you had to choose one thing where a DAO could be really useful today in a Web2 company, what would it be?
Well, there's a whole issue about Web2 companies trying to convert to Web3, and I think that's stupid. That's not how innovation works. What usually happens is that incumbents get disrupted and they die, and newcomers come and take their place. So I don't believe that there's a possibility of a big traditional player converting to Web3 and still being successful. By the way, we have plenty of examples of that failing. Just like recently, Porsche did something.
The Porsche, yeah.
It was a fucking disaster. But there is, I mean, there's kind of this philosophy around Web3 and crypto that it's not, a big part of it is not compatible with the traditional business world. And so all the frameworks and all the foundations that we have in Web3 and crypto and blockchain, they don't really play within the same philosophy. So, which is a good thing, because and that we can thank the Bitcoin white paper for that, because that's what set the stone to the first block of Bitcoin blockchain basically is criticizing the traditional capitalistic world, with the headline on the Lloyd's newspaper, and so that sets the stone of the whole thing, right? Like the foundations are different, and so it's really hard to pick up a model of the traditional world and try to fit into Web3 thing. So the best approach is always to think about what's the native shape of a thing in Web3 and try to build that and experiment. But it's always going to be weird. It's always going to be strange. It's not going to be normal. And it's always going to scare people. It's going to be a big change to transition to that. That's basically the thing. But until it gets normal, it gets more.
But do you see, for example, even with these recent collaborations that you have had, like even with bigger companies like Amazon, Google, they are trying to kind of make the transition and partnering with some of Web3 ecosystems. Could you see in those and those platforms, they also have like a strong community of builders, engineers, software developers that are kind of still working in solutions for the Web2. Could they try to, or do they have incentives, even in a tech world that has had lots of issues in the recent months? Do they have incentives to trying to find a way where the ideology of a DAO could actually help them on their day-to-day? And once that, for example, if layoffs were decided by a DAO, they probably wouldn't have happened, or maybe the extra hiring that was done during a period of the pandemic probably wouldn't have happened as well. So do you believe that those would be initial things that a DAO could be helpful, but probably the leaders that are
currently in place will never,
they will never. So do you believe that the DAOs for the coming years are still something that reserved to the Web3 world, or do you think that there can be kind of this dimension across the currently more popular Web2 companies?
I mean, again, the frameworks of decentralized or more decentralized governance, like sociocracy, holacracy, and TIL, and all that, those have been tried out, right? And companies that have done, like Zappos is one of the big examples of holacracy and so on. And it works, you know, like it kind of works, apparently. I'm saying this with a bit of a laugh because, you know, I've been in a company that was managed with holacracy practices, and it was a big dumpster fire.
What is a holacracy practice? I've never heard.
Yeah, so holacracy is like a philosophy of how a company could work, where decisions are more decentralized, and there's like holons, like nodes and pods, and they rule each other and they decide each other without a central central emperor. Well, with the minimized role of the central emperor. But the ownership is not distributed. That's a big difference, right? Like the employees still don't own the company, like in a way that in DAOs that's possible to do. That's a big difference. So I think we have to invent those models for DAOs, really. And we are experimenting with a bunch of different models, and there's a bunch of DAOs that are doing crazy stuff that we never thought about.
That's what I wanted. That's what I wanted to move the conversation. Was like you have like did a lot of research, and you kind of try to give feedbacks on the companies that are trying to implement the DAOs on their day-to-day business. What are kind of case studies in different, and they can be from any dimension, that you really were like, let's say, inspired by, because you thought, okay, this is like a good step into proving to people that at least in this particular area, this really works and can provide results.
Yeah, so there's a bunch of great examples. So I'll choose a couple of them. So there is, it's always tricky to talk about specific things because people then go in and invest, and then they're going to blame me like, oh, I invested it, no, whatever. Don't take this as investment advice. The disclaimer is, do your own research. I'm not telling you to buy anything, okay? So, but there are some interesting examples of DAOs that have happened. I think the biggest one, and I think it's always worth it to start with this one, because this was crazy when it happened. So Constitution DAO, which was something that was formed like a few months ago, last year maybe, where a few people decided, well, Christie's, like the auction house, the art, the art auction house, whatever, is going to auction a copy, like a paper copy of the US Constitution. Let's put money together as the people and buy it, and let's see what happens. So a guy tweeted this out, a random guy on Twitter tweeted this out, and people were like, yeah, let's do it, how to do that, blah, blah, blah. This was crazy because in 1 week they raised $40 million, and they were actually like the bidding war to buy the thing. And in the end they lost, but it was so crazy because in those auctions, you know, people are represented by a person that's not the real person, right? It's representing on the phone, like, yeah, bid, whatever, right? So a bunch of people watched the auction going live on the internet, live stream, right? And nobody knew who was the representative of Constitution DAO. You know, we knew that there was 2 people bidding, and there was a bidding war. And in the end, we didn't know if we won or not, because we were thought that we were team the lady that was there or team the gentleman that was there. We didn't know which one we were, right? So there was like a few hours after we actually knew if we had won or not. And I mean, it was crazy because it was set up so fast. It came up with leadership of itself so fast. It came up with a website, branding, communication so fast. Goal, like plans on what to do with a piece of paper,
and media attention, that it's always very important.
Obviously,
in
a bunch of media
situation.
So I mean, that was the one of the first examples where I was like, okay, this is crazy. This spreads like wildfire. A fucking crazy idea of someone on Twitter like came up with a $40 million fund to buy this piece of paper that we ascribe meaning to as a society, or the US does. And that kind of proved a point for this type of DAOs, which is like special acquisition DAOs, like DAOs that form just to buy something. And they can do that because they think that that thing should be in the public domain, or that should be not in the private collection, or it should be whatever. That should be some other use to that thing because it's relevant to society, instead of being owned by some douchebag somewhere.
I really liked two examples like those ones. I saw one that they were trying to buy an NBA team. I think I don't remember which NBA team exactly they were trying, and there was another one where I believe that Web3 can sometimes kind of represent like a second life to a company, which was, there were a couple of people, and I think they are still trying to do that they were trying to recover the Blockbuster name, the company that was destroyed by Netflix. They were trying to buy it so that they can.
It was a meme. They did it as a meme. They were like, do you know what would be funny? Is if we would fuck Netflix by buying Blockbuster and make it much better than Netflix, right? And make it a centralized video platform for
exactly. And
it's a meme. It's funny, and then people are like, "Yeah, that's funny. Take my money," right? So that's kind of the mood of how it works. But for example, Krauss House is impressive, the level of professionalism that they have, and I mean, I hope they actually do it, and they actually buy the NBA team, they actually manage it, and so on, because I think that's one of the kinds of decisions that it would be beautiful to see that experiment. Because we always wondered, like, we see our favorite football team or basketball team or whatever, and we're like, why did the coach put this guy instead of this guy, and why the strategy of the team is like this, right? As a fan, you feel that, and you can't help but wonder, like, wouldn't it be crazy if fans actually could decide the strategy of the team?
There's a football club doing that in England, right? I saw an example. There's a club that
they were brought also to that. Yeah.
Exactly. There's a group of fans that organized in a DAO, and they are kind of
like Arvington FC or something like that.
Exactly. They are not part of all the decisions, but I knew that the way that they built the DAO and the way that the smart contract was developed was kind of, they have actually influence in things like, should we buy this player or not, or is this a good way to
there's a bunch of people that play Championship Manager or whatever it's called, like football manager, the game, right, where you pretend to be a football club owner and you do that. Like, there is knowledge in the collective, in the community, about those things. A lot of people have eyes, and they see the football player playing, and they kind of make a judgment of, is he good, is he bad, is he better in this position, is he better in that position, is he better when he's playing with this guy, not maybe much better than one single coach or one single team of coaches, right? So the type of decisions that maybe would benefit from a collective intelligence maybe are this one. So I would love to see Krauss House actually buying an NBA team, and the bet in there is, if they do, will they win? Because imagine if they win the NBA with a team that's governed by a community, not by a central billionaire or whatever in the team, that's kind of a big deal. That's kind of crazy. That's kind of a proof of, like, yep, they were deciding things not in the best way, and deciding things in this way comes up with a better result. Maybe. Let's see.
Yeah. One other use that I really like, because it directly impacts some of, I work in the media industry, so it kind of impacts me, which is there were some companies in the space. For example, I know Decrypt is doing this, which they are kind of creating a DAO in order to get not necessarily a mandatory stories that they need to follow, but trying to get feedback from their audience and the way that read their work on the stories that they should follow, or they should kind of do some investigation or coverage. Do you believe that or in industries like the media one, where you always have different opinions and opinions that often run into a conflict, that is this a good model for the media space, for example? Do you believe that?
Because it's basically a collective curation, right? And specifically for investigative journalism and stuff like that, where you always have the issue of, like, who funds this, right? Who pays for investigative journalists? No one, right? So, Gulbenkian or some foundation or whatever, George Soros or whatever.
Yeah.
So investigative journalism is harder to fund, but imagine that there's a group of people that are actually really interested in this thing, and they put up money up, like they put a bounty that if journalists do some investigative journalists about this topic, and they release it into the wild, they'll get this amount of money. It's like a bounty for that to happen, and that will motivate journalists to investigate it and be like, oh, there's a story here. Oh, there's a great story here, and let's do the story and publish the story. So I think there are mechanics there that could work, because currently it is a big bet for media companies and journalists to be like, oh, we're going to investigate this thing, and we will hope there's a story there, and then we'll spend a bunch of time doing it, and then we'll publish it, and we'll hope people read it, right? It's a big bet. You don't know if people will read it. You get a guess that it's going to be an interesting story, but you still don't know. So those kind of mechanics could benefit from people putting up investment to see that happening, and then journalism responding to that demand by fulfilling that demand. So that can happen with crypto, and I think there's a bunch of things that are like that, right? You only know that they are worth something after they're done, right? And so you can have this kind of mechanics that are retroactive funding to reward things that were done that people actually wanted to have done, and they donated to it.
Yeah, in the media space, the only struggle that I can see is whenever the topic that people probably would recommend the research would kind of have some political influence. For example, if you have like more either left wing or right wing people, like sometimes it will normally a DAO, which is made by people, you will have people that will have connections to a different side, and sometimes there can be like stories that are proposed that can be seen as like, yeah, this is kind of favoring one side instead of the other, and that can generate some issues when you're trying to decide. But that can be applied to mostly anything. But when you talk about politics, that can happen. I don't know.
That always happens. That always can turn into propaganda, and you're favoring this side or the other. So, but there are actually some interesting examples. We had someone from in an event in RnDAO from a thing called societylibrary.org, and what they do is that they take up, like, they start with a subject, and the example that they had was like COVID, right? Or they had nuclear power in California, and they had whatever. And what they do is that they collect information about nuclear power in California, and they collect all the information. They don't care. They collect just all tweets, social media posts, news articles, research papers, scientific papers, whatever it is. They collect everything of it. And then they have a team that maps out all the arguments. So, like, they broke down the claims in like arguments, like nuclear power produces this much, whatever, yes or no, it's true or false, and then there's things to back it up. And so they built up a map that you explore arguments for and against having nuclear power in California, and you can drill down into topics of why, and how many evidence there are to back it up or not. And they don't have any opinion. They don't tell you if nuclear power is good or not in California, but they show you all the data with all the references, with all the links, and you can explore that. And they have up on their website a bunch of other topics like this, like COVID, like whatever, that people can fund upfront to fund researchers to go and collect the data and get the map done, right? So they work in this manner. You can go there, you can see the topics that they have, you can see the kind of thing that they have about nuclear power, which was the first one that they did. And it's amazing, and you're like, okay, is this journalism? I'm being informed, right? I'm browsing this and I'm being informed. I'm learning that nuclear power in California in this plant killed how many ducks in a river because they were putting things on the river. And I'm learning that whatever it is, right? So I'm getting informed by that. It's not traditional media, but it is information that's coming across. And I'm just making my own mind about nuclear power. And I can use this as a tool to make up my own mind about nuclear power, that when I'm going to vote, I can vote according to my opinion, right? Which is much better than voting without having an opinion, right? And that's basically the usefulness of journalism, is to inform the population about the matters, right? So I think it could be some other methods of doing journalism that don't sound like journalism, right? Like, this doesn't sound like journalism, but I, as a citizen, I'm being informed. It's still the same thing.
Yeah,
I'm still being informed, and so it could have had other shapes, and I think the society library is a good example. And I mean, the whole concept is like, we should have, as a society, a library that collects all the information about certain topics that people in the society can benefit from and learn from, basically.
Yeah, I think the only struggle, and I truly believe that there's a really great model, is sometimes whenever, and especially if you present yourself as a media publisher, you kind of align with a certain editorial direction. And sometimes for you, if the people who created that space, that publisher, it's hard for you, I don't know, to trust your DAO that the stories that they provide kind of follow that editorial direction, independent of if it's a media that covers the day-to-day of Web3 world or a day-to-day business that just covers the day-to-day of agriculture, you know? So sometimes that can, for me, that can be like the thing that still needs to be a little bit worked on. But I definitely think that there are still cool things that are being developed. One other thing that I wanted to ask you, and a final like application on the potential of a DAO is in terms of actually investment, because when and not only in Web3 but also in Web2 world, one of the main challenges that 2023 and 2024 present is ways of companies getting access to funding. And we talked about some projects that kind of they gave an idea, and they either if they were a meme or anything, but they had an idea and they were able to raise funding. But what can actually DAOs represent on companies that were established in Web2, for example, and now with DAOs they can actually, if they provide or they develop a service or a platform that people find some value, DAOs can actually be an investment vehicle for the future. How do you look at that?
Yeah, I think people should do that if they are ready to. I mean, not right now because we are in the bear market, but in the bull market, there's a lot of free money in Web3, and a lot of people make up projects and launch tokens to raise money, right? And I think people that do that should be ready to have as investors a bunch of random unknown people. And that's not an easy thing to deal with, because if you go the traditional route and you go to VCs, okay, you convince 3, 4, 5 VCs and you know them and you trust them kind of, and they give you their money, but you also know that, you know, you have to answer to them in some way and work with them as well. But it's only 4 or 5 people. And so as a founder of a company, you will be like, yeah, I handle the investor, right? In Web3, kinda, right? Because if it is truly a DAO, if it is truly decentralized, when you actually make it a DAO, anybody can propose something on the organization. There are a bunch of investment DAOs, which basically is a community of people that come together, pool their money together, and decide, okay, let's invest in this company or this company or this company or this company. And that's by the way, great model. I mean, Talent Protocol was invested by Global Coin Research or whatever it's called, and they operate like that. And it's interesting because those are the types of decisions where, yeah, a community could decide. Like, it makes sense. Like, if like people are like, well, we have $1 million, how do we invest it in who, right? And they're like, I want this much to invest in this much to invest in this much to invest in this, and everybody votes, and the end result is what gets invested. That's it. It's a type of decision that it's easy to see how it can be decided as a collective and make sense and be fair for everybody, right? But in like a VC fund, you have the partners of the VC fund, and one of them wants to really invest all the money in this thing, and the others don't want to, and it's like a shit show, right?
In a VC would be like every LP giving a choice on whether should I invest my money there or not, instead of just the VC guy choosing where to
there's a lot. That's why there's a lot of investment DAOs out there. That's the one actually maybe probably one of the best, more popular types of DAOs out there, and they kind of work. Yeah, they kind of work. They kind of can govern themselves. They can, you know, issue profits to people, and that's they kind of work. I mean, it is also interesting to be someone looking for funding and getting funding from those kind of communities, because there's also benefits on, you know, marketing and distribution and so on, because they are probably not just investors but probably also users, because they're in the Web3 space, right? So they probably will use your thing. So it's a win-win on both sides as well in many areas, actually. So that's a good idea to do it.
And moving to DeNites DAO, which is the DAO that elected you. How do you feel about being part of the?
Yeah, first of all, there was no election yet. So
I know.
And DeNites DAO is not a DAO yet. I want it to become a DAO or more of a DAO. But
that's exactly the type of feedback that I want from you, like, because I think it's important for people to know, like, having DeNites like a new member of the leadership team. What is kind of your view on what should the community go forward and try to achieve, because of course it's always nice, like it's a community of Web3 startups based in Portugal trying to do a lot of things, but what could DeNites as a DAO work to benefit the ecosystem, the industry here and anywhere in the world, or with any company that's coming to Portugal and trying to build operations here?
Yeah, I mean, so yeah, there's even today we were talking about that. I'm filling in Pedro Oliveira's role basically until the end of the season ends. So this season of DeNites ends on September, I think. I think in the beginning of September, and so it started last September. They did all these events along Web Summit and parties, and it was pretty cool, and workshops even, and so the season lasts 1 year, and the sponsors the season for 1 year, and it lasts until September. And so until September, we're trying to at least set up a way to elect new leadership for the third season. So after September, there will be new leadership. Maybe I'll be elected, maybe I won't. We don't know. Maybe I'll be a candidate, maybe I won't. And so the idea is to set up the system where we're gonna have the members of the DAO, which is the people that bought the NFT or will buy the NFT, that we still have to advertise. It's available for sale, by the way. But those people will be the members of the DAO, and they will have a vote with their NFT, right? And they will be able to vote on who they want to elect as the leadership of the DAO. And so we're going to make elections to elect a leadership team that we want to shape in a way that it becomes, let's just say, a more diverse team than what it is now. And so the duty now is to, until September, setting up the system where we can have the members of the DAO that own the NFT be able to elect the new leadership team, and then the leadership team decides what to do next. And people will candidate themselves to become a part of the leadership team with their own visions and their own ideas of what the DeNites DAO could be. I'll probably do that, right? That's why I replaced Pedro, because we're like, oh, maybe you could be there. Like, yeah, let's do it. And so I can probably do that as well. And I have a vision where DeNites DAO could actually be pretty decentralized DAO, and could actually amass a treasury of funds that we could use to do very cool stuff. Because it's impressive how much stuff was done by a handful of people just throwing parties together and creating this movement that it is now. And so I think we could do much more interesting stuff going forward. And yeah, I mean, right now, up until today, nobody was elected to be the leadership of the DeNites DAO, right? Those people just came together and they just started doing stuff, and now they're the leaders because they founded it, let's say. And so it was not operating as a DAO at all, but it was always a plan to transition to the DAO, and that's basically what we're trying to do next until September, hopefully. And even then, even when we will have a leadership team that's elected, that's not really decentralized, right? It was decentralized, the choice of who, but then those people can still do whatever they want. But let's put a term limit. Let's put, boundaries on what they could do, right? Let's put some rules in place so that they cannot just, hey, I want all the money for myself. Bye. Do stuff like that, right? So yeah.
Paulo, it was really nice to speak with you for these minutes and getting to know you a bit better. I hope that everyone in the community, and even people that will be hearing that are not part of the community, really enjoyed the conversation in getting to know the way you think about DAOs. And I really think it was really valuable to learn a bit more on how these things work. And thank you very much for spending this time with me. For everyone who is listening, don't forget to go firstly to DeNites.com website if you want to check what is holding for the season 2 of DeNites, the events that are happening. There are a lot of things happening in the coming months. Don't forget to follow DeNites on Twitter or on TikTok for any announcements. And of course, don't forget to subscribe to DeNites TV on YouTube and on Spotify to not miss any of the episodes. Once again, thank you for hearing this episode, and good DeNites.